Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
People often call me Baker, but my close friends know me as Abe. There's always that one person, either drunk or just clueless, who insists on calling me Andy. "So, Andy, what's your job?" they inquire. I usually reply, "I design this neat gadget for cops to spot drunk folks from afar." It usually shuts them up, but if they keep pushing, it's clear I'm not one to tolerate nonsense. I'm a simple guy, really. I like a straightforward life and take pride in my work. I'm an engineer for a big national company with offices all over. While I'm not big on drinking, I do enjoy the occasional beer. Nachos are more my thing, though. I make sure to stay in decent shape. I used to sail a lot, but family takes up most of my time now. Speaking of family, I've been happily married to Karen for 25 years. She teaches high school, and our two daughters are in college. Claire is at Brown University, while Denise is at Boston University. We're in North Carolina, part of the Research Triangle area. It's a great place to live and work, surrounded by top universities and tech companies. Sure, I miss sailing and Carolina barbecue, but family comes first. It was a bit bittersweet when the girls chose colleges up north, but I understand the importance of exploring beyond comfort zones. They're amazing young women, smart and funny, with strong values. Safety worries me, but I trust their judgment. Now that they're off to college, my wife and I finally have some time to ourselves. I've been looking forward to this stage for a while. With both daughters away at college, I envisioned returning home each evening to my wife's undivided attention, and vice versa. I imagined us reigniting our bond, enjoying days brimming with joy, almost like newlyweds once more. We'd relish dinners out, attend plays and movies, and rediscover each other in ways I'd always dreamed of. However, reality didn't quite match my expectations. Reflecting on that first year of an empty nest, I noticed shifts in Karen. Her interests seemed to evolve gradually, but over time, it became clear that her values and priorities were undergoing significant changes. Karen, an English teacher specializing in creative writing, harbored dreams of being a writer herself. Juggling motherhood and teaching, she never had the opportunity to fully pursue her passion. During summers and spare moments, she dedicated herself to writing, albeit with little success. Rejection letters piled up, and the grand masterpiece she envisioned remained elusive. While I appreciate her writing, Karen's style tends to be formulaic and occasionally overly dramatic. She holds on to a romanticized ideal of being a writer, perhaps more enamored with the notion than the act itself. Yet, if she finds contentment in her pursuits, then I find contentment in her happiness. Throughout most of our marriage, Karen has been involved in various writing groups. These gatherings bring people together to offer critiques, suggestions, and discussions on each other's work, with the goal of enhancing everyone's writing skills. Some of these groups have proven genuinely helpful, while others seem more like social clubs focused on mutual admiration. The last group Karen belonged to, around the time things started to unravel, had elements of both dynamics. They rotated meeting locations, sometimes convening at our house. During these sessions, I made an effort to give them their space. I attempted to join in once, but Karen and a few others weren't receptive, so I decided not to push it. Karen's current writing group comprises about 10 members, both men and women. I have a fondness for some of them, while others I could do without. Half of the group is rather unremarkable, but the other half leaves a lasting impression. Take Reggie, for instance. She's deeply passionate about writing histories and biographies, conducting thorough research and crafting scholarly yet engaging books. I've read all her works and found them enjoyable. Then there's Betty, who has a flair for fantasy writing. She's not aiming to be the next J.K. Rowling. Her style leans more towards whimsical tales, featuring talking unicorns. Her writing seems to be primarily for her own enjoyment, which is entirely understandable. Bill tends to assume the role of the group's resident expert. While his know-it-all attitude can be a bit much at times, he's generally alright. And then there's Frank. The first time I met Frank, I felt a sense of alarm, and that feeling has persisted ever since. It was evident that he was being introduced to me, not the other way around. He looked at me and inquired about my profession, to which I simply replied that I'm an engineer. Frank's response. It was hard to discern whether it was a smile or more of a smirk. I quickly made it known that I preferred to keep a low profile within their group, choosing to stay somewhat hidden and out of direct conversation. However, I'm never too far away, often, I'm quietly working in the next room or on the back porch, within earshot of their discussions. Early on, I noticed a certain camaraderie between Frank and Karen that made me uneasy. They shared inside jokes and a connection that felt exclusive, leaving me feeling like an outsider. Frank seemed to have a keen insight into Karen's thoughts and would reference past conversations that only they seemed to remember. While I've expressed my discomfort to Karen, she tends to brush off my concerns. I've learned not to press the issue too hard, ensuring she knows how I feel, but ultimately leaving the decision up to her. During their gatherings, the group follows a predictable routine. After their work session, they relax with some wine, and it's during these moments that I can't shake the feeling that some of them are putting on a facade. It occurred during the middle of the spring semester, around early March, when the conversation veered towards the lifestyles of renowned writers. You know, Frank began, all the famous writers were alcoholics. They'd write in the mornings and indulge in drinks in the afternoons and evenings. It loosens the mind, opening it to fresh ideas. Then, in the mornings, their creative juices start flowing. He emphasized how these writers were driven by romantic relationships, claiming it was their main motivation. Karen's response to Frank's assertion hit me like a blow to the stomach. Absolutely, she chimed in. It's the intensity and thrill of the unknown, the excitement of keeping it all concealed from others. That's where genuine inspiration lies. Some chuckled at her words, while others remained silent. I tried to convince myself it was all in jest, but I couldn't shake off the unease. As the evening progressed, Bill proposed a wild night of passion, suggesting it could inspire us to each write the next great American novel. I couldn't quite decipher if he meant it humorously or not. I firmly believe that character flaws don't necessarily translate to exceptional writing. Instead, remarkable stories are built on qualities like humanity, empathy, and grappling with life's mysteries. As I mentioned earlier, I admire Betty's work, as unforgettable stories stem from overcoming challenges, striving for greatness against all odds, and leaving the world in a better state than before. Once again, that jerk Frank was at it with his remarks, suggesting that the solution to our troubles might lie in some magical enchantment. Some members of the group found his comment amusing, but I sensed Betty and Reggie weren't so amused. The discussion shifted to the drinking habits and affairs of writers, and I continued to listen in without revealing my presence. Then, a snippet of their conversation caught my attention. Is anyone else planning to apply for the Illinois Writers' Workshop this summer? Frank inquired eagerly. I've already submitted my application. 6 weeks of writing and discussions with fellow writers could be transformative, he added. It was Karen who revealed her own application, catching me off guard. Frank was quick to offer his support, expressing confidence in her improved writing skills over the past year. Despite my growing unease, I maintained my trust in my wife. In a long-standing marriage, trust is foundational, and suspicions rarely cross your mind. You view your spouse as your partner, your other half, committed to their happiness and success. However, it's devastating when that trust is shattered, as I later discovered. As time passed, I made a conscious effort to set aside the conversation I overheard that evening. As I've mentioned before, I had complete trust in my wife. Some younger individuals might not grasp this concept, but after being married for over 2 decades, trust becomes ingrained in your way of life rather than simply a decision. It was late April, and I was wrapping up some gardening outside when I decided to call it a day and head indoors. As I reached for the kitchen door, I heard my wife talking on the phone. I can't wait 6 whole weeks without any responsibilities, no commitments, and no one waiting for me to get back, she said. My attention peaked at her last words, and I froze in place, listening intently. It's going to be the most self-indulgent 6 weeks of my life. I owe it to myself, and so do you, she continued. I felt uneasy about her words as I pushed the door open and entered the kitchen, catching Karen off guard. Before I could inquire about the conversation, she hurriedly ended the call, claiming it was just Reggie and they were discussing the upcoming end of the school year. I had my doubts about her explanation, especially regarding her comment about no one waiting for her to come home. However, I sensed that probing further for the truth might yield little tonight. Despite my darkening mood, I made a conscious effort to hide it, at least for the time being. Later that night, after dinner, the bombshell dropped. "Babe, you won't believe the amazing news I got today," she exclaimed. "Remember that writer's workshop in Illinois I applied for?" I pretended to be clueless. "No, I don't remember you mentioning it," I replied, though in truth, I had overheard her discussing it that fateful night over a month ago. But she seemed oblivious to my deception. Well, I got accepted. It's a 6-week workshop from mid-June to late July at the University of Illinois. They have lectures, seminars, discussions with accomplished writers. It's a fantastic opportunity. I tried to muster up some enthusiasm. That sounds wonderful, honey. Maybe I can take some time off work and join you. I'd love to listen to those writer talks. Her reaction caught me off guard. Oh, well, we can consider it, she replied, her tone slightly surprised. But it's going to be really intense, and I won't have much free time. My instincts flared up again. Well, you know, I'm not demanding. Maybe I could be the coffee guy for the group, I suggested, trying to play it cool. She offered a nervous smile. That could be nice, dear. Let's see how it goes. But I knew better. I had seen through such deflections before. She was already planning to ensure I wouldn't be joining her in Illinois. I sense you'd prefer if I didn't accompany you. Oh no, it's not that. I just worry you might not find it engaging. You're into computers and circuits, and this is more about writers discussing big ideas. Internally, I was shouting, though I kept it to myself. I'm not unintelligent, honey. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying your mind leans towards details, while writers grapple with larger life questions. But I recognized the subtle dismissal. I'm sure you'll excel, she assured me, already caught up in the excitement. Later that evening, after Karen had retired to bed, I turned to the internet to review our phone records. AT&T provided a feature that recorded all incoming and outgoing calls, along with text messages. Upon examining the phone log, I discovered that the call I had interrupted wasn't with Reggie. If it was, it originated from Frank's phone. It's remarkable how swiftly trust can erode after a quarter-century of marriage. Catching your wife in a lie and discovering her plans to exclude you can shatter the foundation of trust built over decades. Weeks passed, and Karen seemed consumed by discussions about the workshop. Despite my attempts to broach the topic of joining her or visiting at some point, she brushed off the idea each time. Then, she shifted from rationalization to manipulation. Babe, I've got the most exciting news. I got you and Jake 2 tickets to a fishing camp in northern Canada in late June. You can take Jake and both of you can enjoy fishing for those big brown fish you're always talking about. It was a costly gesture, but I understood it as an attempt to express gratitude for my understanding about the writer's workshop. Yet, a pang of guilt lingered knowing I wouldn't be joining her. I had a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. Thanks, dear, that was thoughtful of you, I acknowledged. Honestly, I'd have a better time with you. We've been through this, AB, she responded. It's just not practical. I'll be working throughout, and I'd feel bad neglecting you like that. I briefly studied her face and eyes, trying to decipher her expression. Was it condescension? Thanks, honey. Canada sounds fun, I replied, though my tone lacked enthusiasm. In my mind, I was already considering my options. A surprise trip to Illinois lingered in my thoughts. Well, you could at least say it with a smile. Those tickets were expensive, and I want you to be happy, she urged. Sure, sounds fun, I agreed before heading down to the basement to tinker for the rest of the evening. Our house, with its old design, had a floor grate in the hallway for warm air flow from the furnace room. Initially, I made a point not to step on it accidentally, but over time, I grew used to it. As I quietly worked in the basement, I overheard Karen making a call in the hallway. Yes, I gave him the tickets. He's still hesitant, she said. I don't know. I keep telling him he won't enjoy it. No, I can't just tell him not to come. My throat tightened as I listened further. I understand, and I want that too, but I want to stay married afterward, she continued. I just need him to give me some space to enjoy myself for a few weeks. I deserve it. I've earned it. Yes, I want those weeks with you as well. With a lump in my throat, I realized the gravity of the situation. I'm not clueless. I recognize infidelity when I hear it. Either Karen was having an affair or considering one. Anything less, and she'd still have a lot of explaining to do. It took me 20 minutes to gather my thoughts. For now, I had to become the kind of liar I've always detested. At least for the moment, I needed to keep my intentions hidden until I figured out my plan. I'm heading over to see Jake and give him the good news, I called upstairs in my most affectionate tone. Oh, that's great, dear. Enjoy, she responded. And just like that, I was out the basement door. Visiting Jake was merely an excuse. As I pondered, I realized I needed someone to confide in, and Jake had been my closest friend since childhood. "You're kidding me, AB," Jake exclaimed, not one to beat around the bush. "No way, I don't buy it. She'd never betray you." We sat in silence for a moment. "You need to have a conversation with her about this, AB," Jake advised. "You can't go through the next couple of months assuming the worst without knowing the truth." "And what's she going to say?" I questioned, the uncertainty weighing heavily on me. "How much are you willing to bet that when I go through the phone records later tonight, it won't show her having a conversation with Frank?" The fact that she referred to someone as "baby" on the call, it's highly unlikely that it was Frank, and whoever she's confiding in probably isn't him either. I'm not inclined to make that wager. "So, what do you suggest we do?" "My plan is to sit down and engage in an honest conversation. That's what you do after spending 25 years together. I'll express my affection for her, convey my disappointment that she doesn't want me to accompany her, and straightforwardly ask why she prefers my absence. Do you think she'll be forthcoming with the truth?" I highly doubt it. But regardless, I'm committed to being truthful, even if some of it isn't what she wants to hear. She needs to grasp the depth of my love for her and understand that infidelity would jeopardize our relationship. After that, she'll probably attempt to persuade me that I'm imagining things and that I should just go fishing. Speaking of fishing, I have 2 tickets for a fishing camp in northern Canada in late June, and one of them is for you. Jake, being Jake, offered his support, and it's evident where his loyalty lies. We had a good chat, shared our thoughts, and had a few drinks over the next 3 hours before I called it a night. After dinner, I invited Karen to join me in the living room, where I proceeded to express my concerns about several matters that have been weighing on my mind. "Well, almost everything. I held back a few things, sweetheart. I'm troubled by your lack of transparency regarding the writer's workshop. I overheard you discussing it with your writers group back in March, yet you failed to mention it to me until you had already made plans to attend. I even overheard you talking about how affairs are common among great writers, which I must say, I didn't find amusing at all. Additionally, you've been conversing with Frank about your trip, but when I inquired, you provided false information and claimed it was someone else. You're fully aware of my feelings about him. Furthermore, when you informed me about being accepted, you seemed deliberately distant and discouraged me from participating. While I understand that I don't have to be there, I wanted to share in this exciting journey with you, rather than learning that you made arrangements for me to be elsewhere without even discussing it with me, merely committing me on my behalf. It appears as though you're attempting to ensure that I won't be around while you're in Illinois. I don't believe you've been completely honest with me, and I'm starting to question your fidelity. Sweetheart, I've never treated you that way, and I would never be unfaithful to you. What's come over you? You're my husband, and all I want is for you to have a good time. It deeply pains me that you could think something like that about me. I can't control my feelings or what triggers them. You know I love you. I've loved you since we first met. But I can't simply overlook the notion of betrayal. Is that what you think I'm planning, Karen? Is this writer's workshop supposed to be your escape from our marriage? Our conversation ended abruptly, transitioning from understanding to heated exchanges. She erupted into yelling, and for the remainder of the night, our interactions alternated between shouting and silence. In the subsequent week, silence became her weapon of choice, a tactic aimed at coercing me into submission. Despite her efforts, I remained resolute in my convictions. Yet, I realized my approach wasn't yielding progress, so I acquiesced, allowing her to believe she had prevailed. If she harbored intentions of infidelity, my resistance seemed futile, especially considering the suggestive nature of the phone conversation I overheard. Grudgingly, I expressed gratitude for the trip to Canada, though my mood remained somber until its conclusion. Once her desire was fulfilled, she reverted to a facade of affection, seemingly flipping a switch, which only fueled my suspicion. I'm well versed in the art of manipulation, having been subjected to it firsthand. The Illinois Writers' Workshop, conveniently located about 500 miles away, presented an opportunity. Consulting a coworker who had faced similar suspicions, I enlisted the services of a reputable investigator based in Illinois. The workshop setting, situated on a state university campus, proved advantageous. While the operatives couldn't participate in the program, they could discreetly observe the surroundings. Meanwhile, our daughter's decision to remain at their universities for summer research provided an opportune window of privacy for our investigative endeavors. Despite my efforts to reconnect through intimate dinners and outings, her response remained lukewarm. Beneath her facade, I gradually discerned a sense of complacency, realizing she took my presence for granted, perceiving me as a reliable constant in her life. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I understood that her actions weren't driven by a lack of love but rather by a sense of entitlement. Convinced that I would always be there upon her return, she embarked on her journey, leaving me with unresolved tensions. On the day of her departure, I couldn't let her leave without addressing our concerns. Clutching her tightly near the door, I professed my love and pleaded for reassurance. However, met with her dismissive response, I watched as she departed, her gaze fixed forward, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. In that moment, the certainty of my marriage's demise after 25 years, alongside our 2 grown daughters, loomed heavily. It seemed as though our bond was quietly dissolving, devoid of any significant commotion. The private investigator diligently carried out his duties, noting that they made no attempt to conceal their actions, given their unfamiliar surroundings. Upon reaching the workshop, Karen's absence of wedding rings hinted at a deliberate act, possibly removed during the flight. Interestingly, she openly declared herself as recently divorced, and the bond between my wife and Frank became unmistakable. They indulged in public displays of affection, behaving like enamored teenagers. My PI ingeniously installed a discreet video camera in the dormitory hallway, meticulously observing their movements. Despite having separate rooms, they only utilized one, alternating between Karen's and Frank's without discretion. Though I was already aware of their nocturnal activities, the PI went to great lengths to validate my suspicions. During one fateful evening, as darkness fell, my wife and Frank retired early, unknowingly under the watchful eye of 2 operatives posing as ordinary college students. With a miniature fisheye camera discreetly placed beneath the door, their intimate interactions were captured, leaving no room for doubt. This revelation served as the final straw, solidifying my resolve to end the marriage. Throughout the investigation, my private investigator provided regular updates, affirming my decision. As Karen's destiny became clear, so did mine. From the onset of her workshop, I meticulously executed my plan, intending to vanish from her life upon her return, with no room for reconciliation or debate. Love, though resilient, cannot endure without trust. With a cheating spouse, the foundation of our relationship crumbled irreparably. While some may deem my approach feeble, advocating for more severe consequences, the dissolution of my marriage stood as the only viable solution, a painful but necessary step toward reclaiming my sense of self-worth and dignity. In that moment, the certainty of my marriage's demise after 25 years, alongside our 2 grown daughters, loomed heavily. It seemed as though our bond was quietly dissolving, devoid of any significant commotion. The private investigator diligently carried out his duties, noting that they made no attempt to conceal their actions, given their unfamiliar surroundings. Upon reaching the workshop, Karen's absence of wedding rings hinted at a deliberate act, possibly removed during the flight. Interestingly, she openly declared herself as recently divorced, and the bond between my wife and Frank became unmistakable. They indulged in public displays of affection, behaving like enamored teenagers. My PI ingeniously installed a discreet video camera in the dormitory hallway, meticulously observing their movements. Despite having separate rooms, they only utilized one, alternating between Karen's and Frank's without discretion. Though I was already aware of their nocturnal activities, the PI went to great lengths to validate my suspicions. During one fateful evening, as darkness fell, my wife and Frank retired early, unknowingly under the watchful eye of 2 operatives posing as ordinary college students. With a miniature fisheye camera discreetly placed beneath the door, their intimate interactions were captured, leaving no room for doubt. This revelation served as the final straw, solidifying my resolve to end the marriage. Throughout the investigation, my private investigator provided regular updates, affirming my decision. As Karen's destiny became clear, so did mine. From the onset of her workshop, I meticulously executed my plan, intending to vanish from her life upon her return, with no room for reconciliation or debate. Love, though resilient, cannot endure without trust. With a cheating spouse, the foundation of our relationship crumbled irreparably. While some may deem my approach feeble, advocating for more severe consequences, the dissolution of my marriage stood as the only viable solution, a painful but necessary step toward reclaiming my sense of self-worth and dignity. However, ultimately, the law would prohibit me from pursuing such actions, and I had no desire to jeopardize my future by seeking vindictive retribution against my unfaithful wife and her lover. Instead, my vengeance would entail depriving her of the one constant she relied on, my unwavering presence, which offered support, solace, encouragement, and motivation. Frank, her paramour, was hardly a suitable match. He lacked the capacity to fulfill her long-term needs. As a divorced 50-year-old mother, where could she find love and emotional stability? Yet, such concerns ceased to burden me. She was no longer my responsibility. Every few days, my private investigator inundated me with more evidence, photographs, videos, and reports of betrayal by the very person who pledged loyalty above all else. Reviewing these materials was a harrowing ordeal. The visual evidence was particularly agonizing. The audio recordings, capturing their conversations, proved most distressing. Especially when they casually discussed me. He's always texting me about the fish he's catching and how amazing it is up there. He thanks me nearly every day, she remarked with a laugh, joined by Frank's laughter. Keep him in the dark, treat him like a mushroom, and you are free from his annoyance, Frank chimed in, dismissing my concerns. He might as well enjoy himself for now. When I return, I'll confront that nerd about his accusations. How dare he keep accusing me of cheating? Her laughter continued, seemingly entertained by the idea. Maybe he's onto something, but I won't tolerate it. I'm a writer, damn it, and he's holding me back with his circuits and computer jargon, his millimeters and micro thingamajigs. What does he understand about big ideas, she scoffed. As I contemplated various revenge strategies, I came to the realization that none of them would truly bring me satisfaction as long as my life remained intertwined with hers. Only one option seemed viable, to distance myself from her completely. Thus, I initiated the process of disentangling our lives. I engaged in an open conversation with my boss, laying out all the details. Thankfully, he empathized, having experienced something similar not too long ago. Understanding my predicament, he facilitated my transfer to our company's office in Portland, Maine. The prospect appealed to me. I was acquainted with the people there, admired their professionalism, and enjoyed their camaraderie. The town and the state itself held an allure for me. I took the necessary steps, arranging for movers to transport half of our furniture and all my personal belongings northward. Ensuring my car was roadworthy, I consulted with a lawyer to kickstart the divorce proceedings. In terms of financial matters, Karen had her own insurance and retirement account. I took the initiative to remove her name from all my assets and designated my daughters as the beneficiaries. Additionally, I signed a quit claim for the house, relinquishing it to her in exchange for waiving alimony. She would retain her car but would be responsible for her own insurance. I meticulously handled the bank accounts and credit cards, keeping my intentions discreet. From that moment onward, I focused on fortifying my determination. My plan involved testing her honesty by calling her to inquire about the progress of the workshop and expressing my love. I believed that hearing her lies would reaffirm the justifiability of my actions. Predictably, she didn't disappoint. Within minutes of my call, she answered with apparent enthusiasm, professing affection before hastily ending the conversation to join Frank for dinner. Learning later from my private investigator that they exchanged mocking gestures only cemented my resolve. It became apparent that she treated the situation with levity, affirming that my decision was correct. Subsequently, I opted to communicate with her via text messages rather than phone calls, fearing I might not be able to maintain my composure. I would provide updates on successful fishing trips, although in reality, I sent Jake and his wife in my place. Before my departure, I bid them farewell, knowing they'd promised to visit me. As her 6-week workshop drew to a close, I attended to my final tasks. A friend, who happened to be a real estate agent, provided me with a "for sale" sign to place in the front yard. While I couldn't actually sell the house without her consent, I had already transferred ownership to her, a detail of which she remained unaware. Upon her return home, the sign in the yard would be impossible for her to overlook. To further reinforce the message, I took measures to alter the locks on the house, intending to diminish its familiarity as her residence. Carefully selecting specific photos from her trip, including revealing stills captured from the footage taken beneath Frank's door, I compiled a comprehensive copy of the private investigator's report. All of this evidence I left conspicuously displayed on the dining room table, ensuring she would be confronted with the reality of her actions. By the time she returned, the majority of my belongings had already been relocated by the movers, who would store them until I was ready. Only a few essentials remained in my possession: 2 suitcases, my briefcase, laptop, and, notably, my cherished guitar. Entrusting something so dear to me to anyone else felt inconceivable. While Frank may have become entangled with my wife, my guitar remained a steadfast companion. Originally, my plan was to depart the following morning, knowing she wouldn't return until later that night. However, a change of heart led me to alter my approach. The night before, I decided I wanted her to experience the pain immediately, leaving her to grapple with the repercussions alone until her return. In a bold move, I sent her an email containing carefully selected photos of her and Frank, along with the simple yet profound words, "Divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you." Among these images was one capturing their closeness on the dance floor, unmistakably showing her bare fingers without her wedding rings. Another depicted them walking hand in hand into his dorm room, while the third showcased her face prominently in a screenshot from the dorm room video. Anticipating her reaction, I hoped these images would disrupt her final moments with Frank as they frantically searched for cameras that were no longer present. Subsequently, I powered off my phone and embarked on the departure from the house that had been our family home for countless years. It was a moment filled with a blend of pain, uncertainty, and newfound freedom, simultaneously the most challenging, uncertain, and liberating moment of my life. Essentially, my wife had vanished from my life, leaving behind a void filled with unanswered questions. The woman who remained, resembling my wife in appearance only, felt like a stranger to me, someone I neither recognized nor desired to reconnect with. Embracing this fresh start meant confronting an unknown path ahead. Despite the deep sense of loss, there was a peculiar sense of liberation, as if the weight of deceit, betrayal, and belittlement had been momentarily lifted from my shoulders. Yet, the cost of this newfound freedom was steep. Half of my life now felt inaccessible, lost to the currents of change. Despite the late hour, my mind buzzed with thoughts as I drove roughly 100 miles along the tranquil highway. Lost in contemplation, I eventually stumbled upon a hotel for the night. Opting for authenticity, I sought out a local breakfast joint rather than a generic chain establishment. After some searching, I discovered just the spot I was looking for and relished what could potentially be my last plate of grits for quite some time. As I indulged in those comforting grits, my thoughts took a new direction, prompting me to reassess my journey to Maine. This marked the beginning of my fresh start, and with a lengthy drive ahead, I saw no need to rush. With a 2-week window before work resumed, I had ample time to process my emotions, confront the betrayal, and bid farewell to the past. Choosing to take a leisurely pace, I embarked on my northbound drive, savoring the scenery and connecting with each state and its inhabitants along the way. This week served as a transition from my old life to the new, where I intended to pamper my senses, cleanse myself of past mistakes, and prepare for a fresh beginning. The remainder of the day was spent exploring Williamsburg amidst the summer crowds, immersing myself in the talents of local artisans and craftsmen. Despite lacking a reservation, I managed to secure accommodations for the night after a light dinner. However, it wasn't until I settled in for the night that my thoughts circled back to my failed marriage, contemplating how she would react upon returning home to find the for sale sign and realizing her keys no longer granted access. The following day, I continued my journey northward, winding through back roads toward Annapolis, Maryland's capital. Passing through quaint towns and historic plantations along Virginia's ancestral rivers, like the York, Rappahannock, and Potomac, which converge into the Chesapeake Bay, I felt a sense of clarity. Ahead lay a single stretch of road guiding me toward my future, a winding path leading away from betrayal and toward a fresh chapter in my life. Upon settling into my hotel room in downtown Annapolis, I finally powered on my cell phone, greeted by a slew of missed calls, emails, and text messages. Most were from Karen, while a few came from concerned friends. Reading and listening to each message was challenging but necessary. Initially, Karen attempted to downplay the situation, but her tune changed once she returned home and was confronted with the evidence. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, she was searching in all the wrong places as my friends informed me of her frantic attempts to locate me. Jake and his wife were in the know, but I chose to keep everyone else in the dark intentionally. I planned to inform them once I had settled into my new life. I knew I couldn't remain a ghost forever. The 2 calls that truly concerned me were from my daughters. Karen had reached out to them, trying to find out where I was. I had deliberately not told them about my decision to leave their mother, wanting to break the news face to face. However, I couldn't let them worry, so I spoke with my daughters calmly and explained the situation. They were upset and found it hard to believe that their mom could do such a thing. To help them understand, I sent them the same pictures I had sent Karen the night I left home, along with the PI's report. After reading everything, they promised not to inform their mother about my actions. There was one more missed call from my lawyer, who informed me that Karen had been officially served with divorce papers. Now she knew I meant business. He also shared that Frank's wife had received a complete set of photos, videos, and audio recordings from his 6-week workshop. That was karma for Frank. On the third day of my journey, I drove through northern Maryland, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension, and finally reached New Jersey. Well, not exactly, I crossed into New Jersey but didn't stop until I had reached Connecticut. Once in Connecticut, I took a few hours to explore some historic coastal towns. I didn't have a specific goal, but the architecture was so distinct from what I was used to in North Carolina that I felt a strong sense of being in a new place, both physically and emotionally. And don't tell the government, but I spent an hour in Groton trying to spot as many submarines as I could. Those black fish are quite stealthy. While gazing along the shore, I remembered that when they refuel those nuclear submarines, they cut a hole in the hull to access the reactor, then weld the hull back together. Was that a metaphor for my situation? Could Karen's betrayal, which tore a hole in my heart, be the first step in re-energizing my life? Could I heal myself once I embarked on my new journey? The next day, I woke up knowing it would be the most challenging day so far. After a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, toast, and a strong cup of black coffee, I braced myself for a difficult conversation with my eldest daughter, Claire. The drive to Claire's dorm didn't take long, and I arrived there late in the morning. We decided to delay our serious conversation for a bit so she could maintain a cheerful appearance for an hour or two. Claire showed me around the campus and then took me to the cafeteria, where she introduced me to her friends. They were exactly the kind of young men and women I had hoped she would be surrounded by, friendly, attentive, and mutually supportive. On our way out, I took Claire's roommate aside and informed her that Claire was going to have a tough day. I asked her to look after my daughter. She responded, "Of course, Mr. Baker. She shared with us last night. We're all here for her." Yes, my daughter had chosen her friends wisely. Claire and I spent hours in her dorm room having a long, heartfelt conversation. I shared photographs and played audio recordings that I never thought I would have to share with one of my children. Her emotions shifted between sadness and anger. I can't believe Mom would do that. Is she even the same person who raised us? What kind of disgusting person has she turned into? I had to intervene at that point. Claire, regardless of what she's done, she's still your mother. Remember, it's me she's betrayed, not you. Sorry, Dad, but she shattered my only family. This is absolutely affecting me. I couldn't dispute that. Throughout the afternoon, we continued our conversation, and I outlined my plans to her. I encouraged her to gather her friends, and we went out for dinner at the best place in town, or at least the best within my budget. It seemed like everyone enjoyed a break from the usual dining hall food. I shared stories of my own college dining experiences, and I think it gave them a newfound appreciation for their current situation. I stayed at a local hotel that night, and the next morning, I had breakfast with Claire, held her in a tearful hug, and then headed north to Boston to repeat the process. Claire must have informed Denise because her reaction was much more composed than her older sister's. There was still disappointment and anger, but less surprise. She requested to see the evidence, and I showed her. Coincidentally, her mother called while we were talking, and I gave Denise the universal sign for, "No, I'm not here." I shook my head, gestured frantically, and mimicked a throat-cutting motion. She understood. Denise was always the more level-headed one in the family. Then she did something I never expected. She said, "Dad called last night, didn't he? Is it true you become a woman who cheats on her husband and lies about it, becoming involved with multiple partners?" I was taken aback. I wanted to scold her for speaking to her mother like that, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the truth in her words. "You heard me, Mom. You spent 6 weeks being involved with someone else while Dad was alone at home. Was it worth it, Mom? Was it worth losing your marriage over?" Wow, my daughter has quite the way with words. Note to self, don't get on her bad side. There wasn't much more to discuss. Denise informed me that her mother was mostly in tears and attempting to offer excuses, but my daughter wasn't buying any of it. Later, I took Denise and her friends to a Thai restaurant called the Elephant Walk, not far from campus. Just like her sister, Denise had chosen her friends wisely, and dinner was a pleasant affair. On our way back to campus, one of her friends said, "Mr. Baker, Denise told us about what you're going through. She was really upset last night, but we supported her. Maybe you could visit us again, and we'll treat you to the cafeteria." That comment elicited laughter from the group. "I mean, well, actually, maybe we can find a better place than that," sparked more giggles, and we laughed all the way back to her dorm. I found a place to stay for the night, had breakfast with my daughter in the morning, and on the 7th day of my journey, I continued heading north. I departed Boston and found myself just 2 hours south of Portland. My focus had shifted from my soon-to-be ex-wife to my daughters. They were growing into strong, principled young women, and I couldn't be prouder of them. I now realized they would navigate the upcoming divorce better than I had anticipated. The challenge on this day was leaving these two amazing gems behind with no certainty of when I'd see them again. As it turned out, my worries were unnecessary. I wasn't prepared to confront the reality of starting my new life just yet, so when I reached Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I turned west and drove towards the White Mountains and the Presidential Range. I entered the White Mountains and took the cog railway up to the summit of Mount Washington. Standing there, gazing across the expanse to the smaller peaks of the White Mountains and surveying the green pine forest below, feeling the cold Arctic winds that seemed out of place in the early days of August, I finally sensed a rebirth within myself. I was alone, but at last, I was standing tall. I had gone through a transformation, leaving behind the challenges and regrets of my old life, and now I was ready to embrace the new chapter and all its potential. I stood on higher ground, prepared to embark on a fresh journey. Everything I desired lay ahead. The next morning, I ordered a plate of pancakes topped with real maple syrup. I was in maple syrup country now, and that would be the case for years to come. Feeling rested and eager, I got back into my car and drove to Portland. I arrived in the mid-afternoon, so I decided to touch base with my new boss to let them know I had made it. I was already acquainted with about half of the office staff, and I received a warm welcome. It felt reassuring. They were the first cheerful, uncomplicated faces I had encountered in a week. My new boss, Henry, gathered the office for introductions. I had a quick tour of the workplace, but not before everyone agreed on where we would all go for dinner. I assumed it would be a downtown restaurant, but to my surprise, we ended up at Henry's house, grilling steaks and enjoying all the accompaniments. I know I should have savored lobster in Maine, but there was no rush for that. This was more about reintegrating into society. While enjoying some exceptionally good steaks and truly outstanding local beer, they inquired about my story. What was a guy from the South doing uprooting his life and moving to Maine at this stage? So, I shared my tale. I omitted the graphic details but provided enough for them to understand. I concluded with a small request: I might get a bit short-tempered in the next few weeks. It's not my usual demeanor, but I have a lot to process. I hope that if I act out, you'll call me out and tell me to cool it. I could use some gentle pushback now and then. Unexpectedly, every woman there hugged me and gave me a peck on the cheek, while every man put an arm around my shoulder. "We're here for you, AB," they said. That was all they needed to say. Later that night, when I settled into my hotel room, I turned on my cell phone again. Both of my daughters had sent me supportive text messages. It seems they shared my number with their friends because I received about 8 or 10 additional texts from their friends, who appreciated the dinner and wanted to let me know they would be there for my daughters. Those kids are truly wonderful. Several friends continued to reach out, so I decided to connect with all of them and explain the situation to ease their concerns. I didn't reveal my location, planning to do that later. I simply explained why I had left. Despite their initial reluctance to believe me, I sent them the same 3 photos I had sent Karen and informed them I had even more incriminating evidence if they needed further convincing. I thought about it, but honestly, I couldn't find a reason to shield her from her own choices. I had tried, and it hadn't worked, so let the truth come out. In due time, I received messages of love and support from each of them, and I assured them I would stay in touch. It was becoming increasingly clear that my notions of becoming a ghost were just wishful thinking. Too many people cared about me, and that's certainly a positive thing. I went through the remaining text messages from Karen and listened to the missed calls. Eventually, she came clean and confessed, though her confession was mixed with strange bursts of anger. She managed to blame me one way or another for her actions and for everything that had unfolded. Well, that's just ridiculous. I sent her a text saying I'd call her the next day around noon. It had to happen sooner or later. Let's just say the conversation was far from satisfying. She swung between blame, guilt, and denial. She was sorry, Frank's influence was strong over her, I was suffocating her, it was my fault because I worked too much. She even had the audacity to claim that nothing serious happened between them, they were just messing around. I almost burst out laughing when she tried to convince me she was only searching for her creative inspiration. She went so far as to accuse me of turning our daughters against her, as if her own actions hadn't accomplished that without any assistance from me. When she finally fell silent, I laid it out for her in a straightforward manner. She had conspired with Frank to betray me, resisted my efforts to salvage our relationship, carried out the betrayal, and now she was facing the consequences. I no longer cared about the reasons why. When I hung up, she was still crying and pleading her case. I was done with her, there was no turning back. I knew too much. I found a simple yet comfortable two-bedroom apartment in an older building conveniently close to the office. I thought I could use the exercise from walking and initially considered it a temporary arrangement, but my perspective quickly shifted. Living simply in town, avoiding the extra responsibilities of owning a house, and having a small coastal cottage for weekends seemed like a good plan. Then I thought, why stop at a cottage? I could get a boat, keep it docked in the harbor, and that could be my seaside retreat. By the time I sorted all of this out, it was early fall. I thought I'd lead a solitary life, but it hasn't turned out that way. I actually spend more time with my daughters now than when I lived in Raleigh. They come up for a weekend every month, often bringing friends along. During those 36 hours, my apartment buzzes with activity, and I usually treat them to dinner. Once they're gone, I do crave the quiet, although I miss them as soon as they leave. Surprisingly, a few of my friends have visited, and the rest plan to come when the weather's better. I'm living alone, but I don't feel lonely. I've made new friends at work and through my adventures. The sailing community is lively and inclusive, and I've met intriguing women. However, I'll stay respectful and well-behaved until the divorce is finalized. Even though the divorce will be official soon, Karen still reaches out to me. She never truly repents and prefers to downplay the situation. All she says is, everyone does it, it doesn't mean anything. But it does, the intimacy carries weight, and the deceit and manipulation matter even more. I thought about explaining this to her, but people change, and I no longer see the point. Truthfully, my life isn't fully separate from hers. With 2 daughters and many mutual friends, complete detachment is unlikely. Nevertheless, with 600 miles between us, I no longer live with the daily pain of rejection and betrayal. She used to be the center of my life until I was no longer in hers. Now I'm forging my own path and creating my own future. Several positive outcomes emerged from this situation. To begin with, I genuinely enjoy living up here. I'm going through my first Maine winter, which is a bit of a shock, but if others can handle it, so can I. The early darkness in this region actually makes indoor gatherings feel cozier and brighter. I've started searching for a boat and found a place with moorings not too far from town, so I'm looking forward to spring when I can work on splicing lines and applying varnish. The local restaurants are good, the microbreweries are fantastic, and the people are authentic. There's a variety of music, dances to learn like contra dancing, and I'm still discovering surprises. I believe life will turn out well for me after all. Is my heart fully healed? Not yet, but time has its way of healing wounds, and I'm confident in the better life that lies ahead. Oh, and as a side note, Frank's wife seems to be as old-fashioned as I am. She kicked him out of the house and divorced him. What's even worse, both Karen and Frank are still unpublished. Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.